Maryland football and baseball lands a big-time commitment.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, video content creator for 247 Sports and InsideMarylandSports.com, and host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with your friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store. Game on. So Maryland football gets another big commitment from Bud Coombs, a big-time two-sport athlete, dual-sport athlete out of the DeMatha school. Whenever you get one of these kids that plays two sports and they're able to do it at a college level, it's a pretty special thing. It's a pretty big deal. You don't normally get those type of athletes. You don't normally have a person that can play two different sports in college. It just doesn't really exist. And you have a special type of player when you have a guy that can play two sports. I think of some of the great athletes of all time. I know you guys can think of some like the Bo Jacksons of the world and those type of guys that are able to play two sports in college. I mean, I had a cousin that played basketball and soccer at the University of Georgia, but it is no slight to be able to play two sports in college. And playing a college sport myself, it feels impossible almost to play just one. And so the stress that it comes with playing two and how good you have to be at your craft at two sports, that's a pretty big deal that Bud Coombs is able to play. He's going to be able to play baseball and football at the next level, and he is very good at both. I'm mainly going to focus on football because we mainly focus on football here, but he does sound like he's a great outfielder on the baseball field. But of course, we'll talk about both. But him as a football player, it's a really good football player overall. He's out of DeMatha High School, like I said, so he's in the WCAC. He's playing against some of the best players in the country in the WCAC. I've talked about it a couple times on this podcast. For you guys that don't know, the WCAC is one of the best high school football conferences in the country. It's the DMV kind of schools. Like you think of Gonzaga, who just had two players get drafted in the NFL draft, and Caleb Williams and the offensive lineman Alona Fashonu. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. They had two guys get drafted, and then DeMatha, of course, where Bud Coombs comes from, and Good Counsel is good year in and year out, and St. John's has had some really good players that are playing at Maryland. If you think of Colby McDonald, you think of Rakeem Jarrett, you think of the safety commit that we got in the 2024 class in McIntosh. There's a lot of great players in that on the Maryland team that have gone to WCAC schools, and Bud Coombs can hopefully be the next one. But as a running back, he's 5'10", 185 pounds. He's definitely on the smaller side of things, but that kind of matches up to what kind of player he is and how he plays the game of football. He runs hard for sure, but 247 has him ranked as the 56th ranked running back in his class and the 17th ranked player in his class, or in the state of Maryland, and they have him ranked 732 nationally on 247 composite. So he's definitely a pretty high-level player, had some other really good offers as well, but being a three-star ranked in the top 750 in your class is not a bad thing at all for Coombs. And I think he's one of those guys, the running back position is one of those guys where you can find really good players that aren't just the five-star guys that everybody knows that, okay, everybody wants. But this kid, I think, has a chance to be a really special running back for Maryland football. And I'm looking at his offer list for football, and he had some other really solid offers. He said He said Michigan was after him. I watched a video of the Michigan Wolverines, and I watched a video about this guy talking about how Michigan really wanted this kid. So anytime Michigan's in the battle, that's a pretty good sign that Michigan's in the battle with you because, of course, national championship team, they do a pretty good job at recruiting there. Michigan is interesting because, don't get me wrong, they do a good job of recruiting, but they don't do an elite. I wouldn't say that they're like a top 5 recruiter. You might put them in the top 10. I don't know. But when I think about Michigan the last 2 years and how good they've been without putting together like top 5 classes, when you think of like Bama and Georgia always being up there, like they have the number like 1 and 2 class usually every year. And then Clemson's glory days a couple of years ago, like they always had a top class. But I never thought of Michigan as a team that had a top class, or Ohio State as well. I feel like Michigan would always be hovering around the like 15 to 20, like 10 to 15 range. So it's interesting, but still the fact that Michigan was after him is still a big deal. But he had other offers, of course, Georgia Tech, Duke, Boston College, Cincinnati, to just name a few, Indiana, which is another good Indiana was a finalist. So Indiana is another good team that we want to be at. We don't want to play him every single year, or I guess it's a little bit different now with the new Big Ten schedule. We wouldn't necessarily play them, but we don't want to have to, if we did play them, we wouldn't have to want to play against this guy. This isn't a guy that we want to go to another Big Ten school. Same thing with Michigan, of course. We don't like those other Big Ten schools. If you're not going to Maryland, we'd rather you stay out of the Big Ten. So he did have some other offers in terms of football. And then the interesting part of things is he did have other baseball offers as well. Alabama, he had a baseball offer for Alabama. He had some other he had some other baseball offers too. And so it's interesting because of the dynamic of the baseball. I'm unsure of like if he's like maybe a slightly better at one sport than the other. Baseball versus football is interesting because it's like they're very different in a lot of ways in terms of, I think of baseball, and it doesn't hurt your body as much. You don't have that physical tax. And a lot of people would tell you, go play baseball, don't play football, because sometimes if you play football and if you play in the NFL, I'm not saying he's that kind of guy. I'm not saying he's not that kind of guy. I just don't know yet. But if you are able to play football at the highest level for a couple of years in the NFL, your body can have regrets for the rest of its life and be in a bad condition for the rest of your life. Just ask some of the NFL guys that stop playing football. But if you play baseball for 10, 15 years in the MLB, but it's very hard to go up the ranks in baseball, but still you don't have that same tax on your body. But that's kind of just getting ahead of everything. I mean, it's still a simpler version at the college level in terms of that physicalness that you get from playing football versus baseball. But it's interesting. But I watched this kid's game. I watched his huddle before going on here, so I was able to talk about his game. And explosive back, speed. The reason he's not the biggest cat is because he's not really a guy that's going to run through you. He is going to run around you. He's going to separate from you. I watched the film, first couple of plays. It's like just plays to the house. And I'm like, yeah, this is the kind of guy that we want. He's got to get a little bit stronger, I say, just to get a little bit bigger, to be able to bounce off some contact at the running back position in college. But in terms of his speed and his explosive ability and his home run threat, I love it. And I think it's perfect to bring into this Maryland's offense. Roman Hemby ain't going to be here forever. And I think we have similar – I think Nolan Ray is kind of similar to what this kid is right now. But I still love his game, and I think that he's going to bring home run ability to this Maryland football running back room that is great. You need guys that sometimes can take a 1 yard, 2 yard supposed to be gain and make it into a 50-yard touchdown. And so I love that type of guy. And so that's the things that stick out when I watch this game. An explosive back. He's got speed. Like, he's separating guys. Reminder, in the WCAC, a very good conference. And he did some really good things in the WCAC. He had a couple of huge games against some big-time programs in the WCAC. He was over 1,000-yard rusher, which is a pretty big deal in the WCAC. So he rushed for more than 1,000 yards and helping DeMatha get to the WCAC title, which definitely is a huge deal. WCAC title That's enormous to those guys playing in that game. And that's a big deal for a lot of people in the DMV high school football, anyone that plays in the WCAC. So he's a huge part of the DeMatha offense. And he was probably the one that made the DeMatha offense go in a lot of different ways. And he also had one of his top performances, 227 yards and 3 touchdown performance on the WCAC semifinal against Gonzaga. That's a day. 227 yards against Gonzaga and 3 touchdowns. A reminder, Gonzaga is a really good football school. Like I said, Caleb Williams went there. The offensive lineman that got drafted, Alano Fashanu, also went there. And so I'm looking at this kid. He's doing it at a really high level, and you can see by the yards that he has, he's got home run ability. He could have a couple of carries, and it's like, oh, he's already at 100 yards. Obviously, that gets kind of toned down once you get to college, but still, he's still going to have the ability to run by guys, to run past guys, and he's not going to run through guys as much. He's not going to be our goal line back, but he's going to be a guy that we want to just get the ball in his hands, get him in the screen game. I'm sure he can catch passes and come out the backfield as well. And so I'm excited to see himself as a player. I think it's a really good get for Maryland football and baseball. Can't forget that. And I'll be curious to see kind of his trajectory of playing 2 sports at Maryland and see how well he does it, if he decides to focus on one, baseball or football, or what the kind of deal is. But he can do either one at a super high level because he's supposed to be a top-ranked baseball player as well. So I'm interested to see what he does. Let's talk about Taulia Tagovailoa. He did go undrafted, but can he succeed with the team that picked him up? I will tell you about that after this ad from Monopoly Go. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's board. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers you can trade with friends, complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges, a ton, to include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure and robot machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download now on the free on Google Play or the Apple Store. Game on. So Taulia Tagovailoa did end up going undrafted in the NFL draft, and part of me wants to be kind of mad and disappointed that he didn't get drafted. But the more and more I think about it, I don't know if he should have gotten drafted. I just don't know if he's big enough. I don't know if he's got the big enough arm. With the concerns about his pro day, I don't know if it would make sense for an NFL team to draft him. I don't know. I try and put myself with no bias, absolutely zero bias, not just being a Maryland guy and talk about Maryland every single day, but just trying to have no bias to think about Taulia Tagovailoa as an NFL prospect. If I was an NFL GM and I'm a guy that likes attributes, I like traits, I like big arms, I like guys that can move, I like guys that are special. But when you're drafting a guy late, those guys aren't going to have dynamic traits unless you're there were some, I guess. Spencer Rattler definitely has some pretty big time traits in terms of his playmaking ability at the position. And then Joe Milton as well definitely has some really top-end traits. And he went late to the Patriots, which was interesting because they had already drafted Drake May. But in terms of your later round guys, a lot of those guys aren't going to have the biggest arms and be the fastest guys and whatever, all those type of things. Or they'd probably be an early rounder pick. And so I think about Taulia as myself, and I'm like, I just don't know if I'd be able to draft him because of his size, his lack of arm power. I don't know if he's going to be able to make the throws that he needs to in the NFL, and that can really condense your offense and make it really hard to open up things down the field, and you're going to end up just throwing checkdowns and throwing stuff that's really easy to cover in the NFL. Excuse me. And so I kind of go back and forth in that case with it. But I also am like, there's an argument to be made that a backup quarterback's not supposed to come in and make explosive throws down the field. He's supposed to be a guy that just comes in, checks the ball down, makes the right read, just makes simple throws. The offense doesn't have to go into some explosive frenzy where you got to throw the ball down the field with him. He's just supposed to be able to manage it until the game until the starter is able to get back and be game managers. That quote that has so many people like going back and forth about the game manager thing. Is that good? Is that bad? People calling like Brock Purdy a game manager and all that type of stuff. The game manager thing's interesting, but I think Taulia in the NFL, if he wants to be in the NFL, he has to be a game manager, quote unquote. And my belief of a game manager, since it seems like everyone has a different definition, is it's a guy that he's limited. Definitely, he's limited. Or I guess you could say this: there's a difference between quarterbacks that are considered game managers and quarterbacks that can play like game managers for a couple of series. If you're up by 28 points, you don't need to play like your normal explosive, throw the ball down the field. You just have to be a game manager. But there's some quarterbacks that have to play like game managers every single play. And I think that's what Taulia has to be if he wants to make it in the NFL. I think he has to just throw the checkdowns, throw the right read. That's going to be different than what he was at Maryland, actually. It might take some adjustments. At Maryland, he was able to throw the ball down the field. He was allowed to do some of those different things. He was able to throw deep balls to Ty Thornton and Caden Prather, but the NFL is different for Taulia. He's not going to be able to make those same type of throws. Some of those, his arm's just not strong enough, I don't think, especially some of those outside the boundary type of throws. Like, you got to have some arm strength in those down the field throws because everything's faster in the NFL. But he's got to learn how to just check it down, make the right read, again and again and again, and continue to do that and know the offense really well and throw the ball away and not turn over the ball, which might be his hardest thing because of how much he turned it over in college. But, of course, the Seahawks did pick him up, and he's headed to Seahawks rookie minicamp, which is interesting because I did work for the Ravens and rookie minicamp and got to be able to see kind of the process. And in the NFL, they all, like, at least the Ravens, I'm pretty sure every NFL team is like this. If you're there, like, they are going to take time and like really watch you and see how you're doing. They're not going to let something slip by them, a good player slip by them that they should have kept them for actual camp. They're not going to allow that to happen. And so if you're a rookie, you have in rookie minicamp that just got signed, you do have a shot if you play well to be able to make it to the next level in terms of making it to the training camp and then making possibly the 53 or the practice squad, which is not easy. But if you play well and play at a high level, then you're going to be able to do that. And I think the Seahawks, he can compete to be the practice squad quarterback. I'm not sure what the third guy is that they have. I'm sure they have probably like 4 or 5 guys in that room right now, but they do. I know that they have Geno Smith as their QB1, very good player. People have different takes on Geno Smith. I think he's a really good player right now in the NFL. And then, of course, they have Sam Howell that they traded for the Commanders. And me being a Commanders fan, definitely mixed feelings about Sam Howell, but I think he's a talented backup for sure. So I'm looking at those 2 guys, and I'm like, okay, those 2 are probably pretty set. And then you get into you got to get to be the 3rd, 4th guy. The 3rd guy might be the practice squad / doesn't really dress. Like, it just depends. But you want to get to being that 3rd guy and being on the practice squad at least. And I think for Taulia, has a chance to do that. I think he's good enough to do that, and he's proven it in college. But he's just got to probably change his game a little bit. Let's talk about Maryland commit Malachi Palmer. I think he's getting overshadowed a little bit. We'll tell you about that after this ad from the Gametime app. Have you ever wanted to go to a game at the last minute, like a Maryland Terrapins game, but finding tickets is hard? I've been there before. Buying tickets to your favorite event shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guaranteed, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's a place to find last-minute tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account or redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Let's talk about Maryland commit Malachi Palmer, because I do think that he's getting overshadowed by Derek Queen, and I think Malachi Palmer can possibly have an impact in year one. Malachi Palmer is one of the biggest mysteries coming into this year as a recruit. I feel like most of the time I have a pretty good grasp of where you are as a recruit and where your game is. Malachi Palmer, I've seen him play, and I'm like, this kid looks really good on film and stuff, but it's like you kind of question why. Obviously, the rankings are everything, but you question why he's not a little bit higher up possibly. But I just am trying to figure out Malachi Palmer in terms of his role next year, because you kind of go back and forth with it and say, it's going to be really hard for him to crack the rotation and for him to play it all, just because of all the talent that we have coming in from the portal, and Deshaun Harris-Smith coming back at the guard spot and Chance Stevens coming back. And then Jahari Long, I don't know his situation with the injury. He might be a medical redshirt this year. I honestly don't know with Jahari Long right now. And I wish I'm looking it up and I just can't find it. They don't announce it. And so it's hard to understand. But I think there's a world where he's too good of a player not to play. He could come in, impress the staff, and he's a guy that they want to get on the court right away. And if he's good enough, you definitely want to play him, because you're always looking towards the future. And I think some of this also has to do with what happens with Chaz Lanier, this guy that Maryland wants that is in the portal, that a lot of schools want, this Chaz Lanier kid. And apparently Maryland's very much in the mix, and he's a guard that could put us over the top. But I think of the guard rotation. I think gotta think right now, Gillespie, Deshaun, Rodney Rice are definitely up there. And then Miguel is definitely in there. And then as well as Miguel. And then I don't know if Chance Stevens plays very much at all. We'll see what happens with that. But that's kind of how you got to see the guard rotation with Gillespie, Deshaun, Rice, Miguel, and then Malachi Palmer. Could he be another guard that we play some? I think it's a possibility. I don't know for sure, but I like the kid's game. I like his versatility as a player. I like how we can do different things on the basketball court, and I think that's so important. I think the best players on the basketball court in today's game are guys that can do a lot of different things, and especially in the NBA, in college as well. And I think Malachi Palmer, I think he can shoot the ball. I think he can drive the ball, and I think that he can pass the ball. I don't know if he's an elite athlete in terms of his quickness and explosive ability going by guys, which is similar to kind of how Kaiser was last year. Because if you remember Jamie kind of was like an interesting athlete, because he definitely wasn't the quickest guy or the most quick-footed guy that was going to be able to just run by guys, but he still was a pretty good player overall. And so I'm looking at Malachi, and I'm thinking, is he Jamie, or is he a little bit better of an athlete than that? And I can definitely see him being a little bit of a better athlete than that. But I would love to see Malachi Palmer play, and I think a lot of it is just going to have to do with this Chaz Lanier guy if we're able to get Chaz overall. But if you look at it, guys that don't play year one that are the talented as Malachi Palmer, they leave, realistically. And I'm not saying Malachi's going to leave. We have no idea what's going to happen next year. But the portal's a thing now, and that's why you kind of have to find minutes for your younger guys early on. Those guys are going to be gone if they don't play year one. I think we saw that with Jonathan Lamoth. He left after year one because he just didn't play very much, and they want to have rules, and it makes sense. If I was a college basketball player and I wasn't really playing very much, I might want to leave too. I might be out of there if I think that I am able to play at the highest level. I might not want to wait until a couple of years down the road. And it's interesting with Malachi Palmer because a lot of the guards in our starting lineup all have eligibility left. And if you look at it, even after in our potential starting lineup in terms of, besides Miguel, who's expected to come off the bench because he likes doing that and everything. Rodney Rice has years of eligibility left. Dejan has years of eligibility left. Jacoby Gillespie has years, and I expect all those guys to probably use it. And so I'll be interested to see what happens with him. I think he's a really good player, and I hope he cracks the rotation, but who knows what will happen with it overall. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked On Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked On Terps.